The coffee cup slipped from Sienna Bellini's hand. Porcelain struck the breakfast plate with a sharp crack, and dark coffee spilled across the white linen before anyone moved. The smell hit her again, bitter and hot, and her stomach turned so violently that she pushed away from the table without thinking. Sienna Bellini, owner of a small neighborhood bakery and unwilling wife of Adrian Valenti, had just gone pale in front of the entire Valenti family because the scent of morning coffee made her throat close. Though everyone at the table believed her husband could never father a child, a fork stopped halfway to Rocco Valenti's mouth. One guard near the dining room doors shifted his hand beneath his jacket. Nobody expected Sienna to make it to the hallway before she bent over the marble console and covered her mouth. Adrian rose without a word. Rocco spoke first. "That is interesting." Sienna looked back. The room had not gone silent because she was sick. It had gone silent because every person in it had reached the same impossible conclusion. 83 days earlier, Sienna had still believed the worst thing waiting for her was a forced marriage. The night the Bellinis came to the Valenti estate, rain beat against the windows hard enough to blur the garden lights. Sienna sat between her mother and younger brother. Adrian Valenti remained at the far end of the room, one hand resting against the back of a leather chair, as if the meeting concerned someone else's life. Sienna hated him for that before he said a single word. Rocco opened a folder. "Your father's debt did not disappear when he died." Sienna's mother flinched. "Sienna, did not. My father borrowed from you." "I did not." Rocco smiled without warmth. "Families inherit more than property. That sounds convenient for the lender." Her brother made a small sound beside her. Sienna kept her eyes on Rocco. "How much?" "Enough that your bakery, your mother's house, and your brother's tuition disappear by the end of the month." Her chest tightened. Or Rocco folded his hands. "Or you marry Adrian." Sienna looked toward the man at the end of the room. Adrian wore black, no tie, no visible expression. He was 34, head of the Valenti family, and the sort of man people described in lowered voices. Sienna knew the rumors. Cold, controlled, dangerous when necessary. She had also heard the detail every aunt in the neighborhood repeated with pity and curiosity. Adrian Valenti could not have children. Rocco leaned back. "The marriage ends a debt and closes an old dispute between our families." Sienna's hands went still in her lap. "So I become collateral." Adrian finally spoke. "No." His voice was quiet enough that everyone else stopped breathing around it. Sienna turned toward him. "Then what do you call a woman exchanged for a debt?" Adrian's gaze held hers. "A bad agreement." Rocco's mouth tightened. "Adrian." He ignored his uncle. "But it can be rewritten." Sienna almost laughed. "You think changing the wording makes this voluntary?" Adrian stepped away from the chair. "No." The answer surprised her. "I think refusing to pretend matters." Rocco's expression sharpened. "The terms are already settled." Adrian looked at him. They were settled without her. The room changed. Not enough to make Sienna safe. Enough to make Rocco angry. Adrian turned back to her. "If you refuse, I will not force a ceremony tonight." Sienna looked at her mother. Her mother's fingers were white around her purse. Then she looked at her brother, whose scholarship depended on an account already frozen that morning. And the debt, Adrian did not lie. "Rocco will collect it." Sienna swallowed. There it was. Choice offered inside a locked room. She stood. "Then if I sign, I set condition." "Roccoskoft," Adrian said. "Name them." Sienna walked to the table and pulled the contract toward herself. "My mother keeps her house." Adrian nodded. "Done." "My brother's tuition is paid directly to the university. No favors attached." "Done." "The bakery remains mine. No Valenti ownership. No Valenti manager. No Valenti man standing behind my counter, because he thinks pastries require armed supervision. One corner of Adrian's mouth moved. Done. Rocco leaned forward. You are negotiating family protection, like a shop lease. Sienna looked at him. A shop lease usually has better manners. Adrian's mouth almost became a smile. Rocco's did not. Sienna continued. I keep working. I keep my own bank account. I am not expected to host dinners, smile for photographs, or pretend this marriage was romantic. Adrian's gaze did not leave hers. Agreed. She tapped the contract. And nobody touches my family because I disappoint you. The room went colder. Adrian answered after a beat. If anyone uses your family against you after tonight, they answer to me. Rocco stared at him. Sienna heard the promise and the threat inside the same sentence. Rocco stood. There is still the matter of succession. Sienna frowned. Adrian's face became unreadable. There is no matter. Rocco looked directly at Sienna. You should understand before you sign. Adrian cannot give you children. This marriage will never create a direct heir. Sienna felt heat rise beneath her skin. Not from embarrassment, but anger at the cruelty of discussing someone's body like a corporate defect. Adrian did not move. Rocco continued. That is why this arrangement is useful. It settles the Bellini debt without disturbing the Valenti bloodline. Sienna looked at Adrian. His face gave her nothing, but one hand had closed against the chair. Did you ask him whether he wanted that announced? Rocco laughed softly. Everyone knows. That was not my question. Adrian's eyes shifted to her. For the first time, she saw something beneath the control. Not shame exactly. Something harder. Resignation. After Rocco left to call the attorney, Sienna remained beside the table. Her mother and brother were escorted to another room for tea. Adrian stayed. The rain sounded louder without Rocco speaking over it. Sienna looked at the unsigned contract. Is it true? Adrian did not pretend not to understand. Yes, you cannot have children. That is what I was told. The wording caught her attention. By whom doctors? More than one. His gaze sharpened slightly. Why does that matter? Because you said what I was told, not what I know. Adrian looked toward the windows. I was injured years ago. Tests were done. The conclusion was clear. And you saw them. Ah, pause. The summary. Sienna noticed that too. Not the original results. Adrian's jaw tightened. This conversation is not part of your conditions. She folded her arms. No. It is me deciding whether the man I am being forced to marry answers simple questions. He looked back at her. The answer is no. I never saw the original laboratory file. An attorney arrived with the revised contract less than an hour later. Sienna read every line. She found one clause giving the Valenti security team unrestricted access to her workplace and crossed it out. The attorney objected. Adrian looked at the page. Remove it. Sienna found another clause requiring public appearances at family functions. Remove that too. Rocco returned in time to hear it. She will be your wife. Adrian did not look up, not your employee. Something inside Sienna shifted by a fraction. It was not trust. Trust required choice. And nothing about tonight had begun with choice. But Adrian was doing something Rocco clearly hated. He was giving her room inside the cage. Sienna signed last. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Rocco watched the ink dry. The Bellini debt is closed. Sienna capped the pen. Good. Rocco smiled. Welcome to the Valenti family. Do not make it sound contagious. The civil ceremony happened inside the estate library shortly before midnight. No flowers, no guests beyond the required witnesses. Sienna wore the same dark green dress she had arrived in. Adrian stood beside her with his hands loose at his sides. When the clerk asked for consent, the word nearly caught in Sienna's throat. Adrian glanced at her, then at the door. It was not freedom. They both knew that. Still, he waited. Sienna thought of her mother keeping the house where her father had planted tomatoes badly every summer. She thought of her brother returning to school instead of abandoning his degree. She thought of the bakery ovens she had paid off, one tray at a time. "I consent," Adrian answered next. His voice did not change. Rings were exchanged because the clerk required a symbolic declaration. Adrian placed hers on her finger without squeezing her hand. When it was over, he stepped back first. Rocco raised a glass in the library. To peace between families. Sienna did not take the champagne offered to her. Peace usually requires both sides to want it. Rocco's eyes cooled. Adrian took the glass from the server and set it aside. "The evening is finished." Rocco looked at him. "You have a wife now. There are expectations." Adrian's gaze became still. "There are boundaries." Rocco smiled. "You sound domesticated already." Adrian did not answer. He only looked toward the door. Rocco left. Sienna waited until the library was empty. "Where am I sleeping?" Adrian picked up the contract folder. "East Wing. Your own room." Her shoulders loosened despite herself. "And you, West. So this is truly an alliance." That was the agreement. Sienna looked down at the ring. "Good." Adrian turned to leave, then stopped. "One thing." She looked up. "What?" "Your bakery opens at 5. Sienna frowned. "How do you know that?" I asked. "You investigated me. I learned your schedule." That sounds like nicer wording for the same thing. Adrian accepted the hit without argument. "A car will be available at 4:30. I can drive myself." "Then the car will remain available." Sienna studied him. "Offer, not order." Small difference. She was beginning to notice small differences. As she crossed the library toward the hall, she saw an old metal medicine box half hidden inside an open cabinet. The label carried a physician's name she did not recognize. Dr. Samuel Crest. Beneath it was a faded Valenti family seal. Sienna would have walked past if Adrian had not stopped behind her. "That should be locked." She glanced at him. "What is it?" He closed the cabinet. "Old medical records." Yours, his silence lasted one beat too long. "Some." Sienna looked at the lock, then at his face. "The locked room already has a locked box." Adrian's expression did not change. "You will find this family likes locks." Sienna touched the ring on her finger. "I noticed." He walked away. She stood alone in the library for another moment. On the desk, beside the contract, someone had left a typed family succession memo. Sienna had no intention of reading Valenti politics, but one line caught her eye. In the absence of a direct heir, succession would pass through Rocco Valenti's branch. The page had been revised 6 months earlier. Sienna looked toward the cabinet Adrian had just locked. Then she looked at the ring. Rocco had called her marriage useful because it could never produce an heir. For the first time that night, Sienna wondered who had benefited most from making everyone believe that was true. Sienna discovered on the first morning of her marriage that Adrian Valenti drank his coffee black, read 3 newspapers before sunrise, and had somehow instructed an entire mansion not to speak to her before she had eaten. She discovered the last fact when she entered the kitchen at 4:20 and found 6 employees moving around her in reverent silence. "This is disturbing," she said, reaching for a piece of toast. Mrs. Conti, the housekeeper, looked alarmed. Mrs. Valenti Sienna gestured around the kitchen. The silence. "Does everyone think I bite before breakfast?" A voice came from the doorway. "I told them, you start work at 5. She turned. Adrian stood there in shirt sleeves, already dressed, except for his jacket. "And that required a vow of silence?" she asked. "I said not to delay you." "Mrs." Conti suddenly found the coffee machine fascinating. Sienna bit into her toast. "Your people interpret instructions dramatically." Adrian poured himself black coffee. My people are afraid of disappointing me. That is not the defense you think it is. He considered that for a moment. Probably not. She left for Bellini Bakery in her own car. The black sedan followed her anyway. By the third morning, Sienna stopped pretending not to notice it. She parked behind the bakery, walked directly across the street, and knocked on the driver's window. A broad-shouldered man lowered it and greeted her with a cautious, "Good morning, Mrs. Valenti." Sienna leaned down. "Do you have a name, Marco? Marco, are you going to follow me every day?" He hesitated, which was answer enough. "Mr. Valenti asked us to maintain distance." How considerate. Sienna went inside, unlocked the bakery, and called her husband. Adrian answered on the second ring. "Is something wrong?" She stared through the front window at the sedan. "You put security outside my bakery. Across the street. Ah, then clearly they're decorative." After a pause, he said, "2 Valenti businesses received threats yesterday. And my bakery. Nothing specific. Then remove them." His voice lowered. "Sienna, no. We wrote this into the agreement. No armed men at my counter. They aren't at your counter." She closed her eyes. "You're using geography to violate the spirit of a contract. I'm keeping my word exactly. That may be worse." Sienna expected an order. Instead, Adrian surprised her. "What would you accept?" The question took some of the anger out of her. She looked at Marco through the glass and thought about it. One person, plain clothes, inside the cafe only during the busiest hours. He buys something like everyone else, doesn't frighten customers, and doesn't report who I speak to. Adrian answered. Security needs to know if someone approaches you with a threat. Then he reports threats, not conversations. Silence stretched between them before Adrian finally said, "Agreed." Sienna frowned. That was suspiciously easy. "I'm learning the difference between protecting your bakery and occupying it." She almost smiled. "Progress. Don't sound so surprised. I've been married to you for 3 days. Exactly. Plenty of time." He ended the call before she could decide whether Adrian Valenti had just made a joke. The marriage settled into an arrangement neither of them had expected to become comfortable. Sienna left before dawn most mornings, and Adrian was almost always awake. Sometimes she found him in the kitchen reading reports. Sometimes he was in the library, conducting calls in a voice low enough to make everyone else leave the room. He never asked where she had been after work, yet he always knew when she was late. That contradiction irritated her until the night a delivery truck broke down and she returned to the estate after 11. Adrian was sitting in the library with a book open in his hands. Sienna stopped in the doorway. "You waited up?" "No." She pointed at the book. "You're holding the same page you were reading when I left this morning." Adrian glanced down, realized she was right, and closed it. "Your phone died." "The battery died." "Yes." And therefore his expression remained composed. "I didn't know whether you were safe." Sienna set her bag down. "You could have called the bakery." "I did." She stared at him. "Twice," he added. Something unexpectedly warm moved through her. "That is bordering on normal human concern. Don't spread it around." Sienna laughed before she could stop herself. Adrian looked at her, and the room changed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh inside the Valenti house. And suddenly, Sienna became conscious of everything she had spent the previous weeks refusing to notice. The quiet intensity of his eyes, the loosened collar of his shirt, the wedding ring on his hand, the fact that they were alone. She stepped toward the staircase before the silence could become something else. "Good night, Adrian." His gaze followed her, but he did not move. "Good night, Sienna." He did not follow her upstairs. He did not use the marriage contract as permission for intimacy she had never offered. That mattered more than she wanted it to. 2 weeks later, Rocco reminded her why becoming comfortable inside the Valenti estate was dangerous. The family gathered for Sunday lunch. A ritual Sienna had successfully avoided twice before Adrian told her that refusing a third invitation would become a political statement. Everything here becomes a political statement. She complained while they walked toward the dining room. Yes, I wore blue yesterday. Did I accidentally invade Sicily? Adrian answered without changing expression. Only a small part. Sienna stopped. You do make jokes. Rarely. They need work. I've been busy. She entered the dining room, almost smiling, and immediately regretted lowering her guard. Across from them sat Rocco and his son, Luca Valenti, 31, polished, intelligent, and visibly uncomfortable whenever his father discussed succession. Sienna noticed it before dessert. Rocco raised his wineglass and congratulated Luca for finalizing the Marseille agreement. Several relatives joined the toast, including Adrian. But Rocco was not finished. The family should become accustomed to seeing Luca handle larger responsibilities. The table quieted. Luca looked down at his plate. Adrian continued cutting his food. Sienna recognized the tactic immediately. Rocco was not praising his son. He was displaying him. How exhausting, she murmured. Rocco turned. What is? Having your father turn lunch into a job interview. Luca coughed into his napkin. Adrian's fork stopped. Rocco smiled thinly. Succession is not a joke. I didn't say it was. You may not understand how families like ours survive. Sienna glanced around the enormous table. By discussing the next boss while the current one is eating chicken. Luca laughed before he could stop himself. Rocco's face darkened. Adrian calmly drank his water, but Sienna saw amusement in his eyes. Then Rocco set down his glass. A direct bloodline simplifies things. Unfortunately, Adrian's condition removes that possibility. Everyone here understands that Luca will eventually have obligations. The humor vanished from Sienna's face. Adrian became completely still. Rocco had done it again, taken something painfully private and turned it into family policy. Sienna put down her fork. Does this family discuss everyone's medical history over lunch? Or only Adrian's? Rocco looked at her. His condition affects the family. It affects him. It affects succession. Then succession has poor boundaries. Someone farther down the table lowered her face toward her wine to hide a smile. Rocco leaned back. You defend your husband quickly for a woman who married him under protest. Sienna met his gaze. I dislike bad manners consistently. Enough. Adrian said it quietly. But the entire table stopped. Rocco turned toward him. Adrian's expression remained calm. My medical history is not lunch conversation. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Luca awkwardly mentioned that the Marseille agreement still required customs review, and everyone accepted the escape. Sienna said little for the remainder of lunch. She kept thinking about Adrian's silence before he finally spoke. It had not looked like agreement. It had looked like a man who had heard the same humiliation so many times that he had learned to disappear behind it. Adrian found her afterward on the terrace. You didn't need to do that. Sienna looked over the garden. Neither did you. I'm accustomed to Rocco. That isn't the same as deserving him. Adrian leaned against the stone railing. You make enemies efficiently. I own a bakery. People become surprisingly violent about wedding cakes. His mouth shifted. Sienna pointed at him. There. Almost a smile. Don't become ambitious. Her expression grew serious. Why does he keep saying it? Because it's true. That you can't have children, yes. She shook her head. No. Why does Rocco need everyone else to hear it? Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Sienna continued. He could discuss succession without announcing your diagnosis every time someone serves dessert. Rocco believes repetition prevents uncertainty. Repetition can also create certainty where there should be questions. Adrian studied her. Are you questioning the diagnosis again? I'm questioning your uncle. That's safer. Is it no? This time they both smiled. And when the silence returned, it felt different from the silence in the kitchen or library. Sienna realized the distance between them had become very small. Adrian noticed too. Neither moved. She could smell his cologne beneath the cold air, and his gaze dropped briefly toward her mouth before returning to her eyes. Mrs. Conti opened the terrace door at exactly the wrong or perhaps right moment and announced that Sienna's mother was calling. Sienna stepped away. She told herself she was relieved. That night, lying awake in the East Wing, she was not so sure. The first time Adrian came to Bellini Bakery without warning, he arrived at 6:15 in the morning and stood in line. Everyone noticed him. Adrian Valenti did not look like a man accustomed to waiting behind a construction worker for a cinnamon roll. When he reached the counter, Sienna folded her arms. What are you doing? Buying breakfast. You have a kitchen staff. I wanted breakfast. You drove 20 minutes for bread. Apparently. She narrowed her eyes. Marco told you I complained that the security man never buys anything. No. Adrian. He surrendered half an inch. Marco told me your almond croissants sell out before 7. Sienna put one on a plate. That is classified information. I have sources. $4. Adrian handed her a $100 bill. She pushed it back. I said 4. I don't have smaller. You are a criminal cliché. I'm not discussing my profession before coffee. Sienna made him find smaller money and sent him to a corner table. Adrian stayed 20 minutes without asking her to sit with him or demanding her attention. He simply drank coffee and watched her work. It should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, she became aware of him every time she crossed the room. When the rush ended, she brought him another coffee. This one is free. He raised an eyebrow. I thought you objected to financial imbalance. I'm bribing you to leave. Expensive strategy. Coffee costs me 30 cents. Adrian looked at the cup. Your honesty is brutal. It keeps the pastries sweet. He smiled, and Sienna felt the ridiculous satisfaction of having caused it. Then Adrian's phone rang. The warmth disappeared from his face before he answered. Sienna walked toward the counter but heard enough. No, don't touch him. A pause. I said no. Another pause followed. Then Adrian's voice hardened. If Rocco wants the problem handled differently, he can speak to me. He ended the call. Sienna returned. What happened? Nothing that belongs in your morning. Her expression tightened. You do that often. Adrian looked up. What? She wiped the already clean table beside him. Decide what belongs to me. You decide what danger I should know about. When security follows me, what questions about your life are allowed? I'm trying to keep this separate from you. We're married. By force. According to you. Sienna's hand stopped. That doesn't make ignorance a wedding gift. Adrian went still. She regretted the sharpness. But not the point. Finally, he said, a supplier connected to the family was threatened last night. Rocco wanted the man brought in, and you stopped it. For now, why Adrian looked toward the window. Because fear makes people say whatever they think will let them go home. Sienna studied him. That answer did not fit the monster people described. You don't like violence. I didn't say that. No. You said something more interesting. Adrian stood. What? You dislike useless violence? His expression closed again. Finish your work. Sienna. She smiled faintly. There. That sounded like an order. Adrian picked up his coat. It was a retreat. He left before she could answer. The next clue came by accident nearly a month into their marriage. Mrs. Conti asked Sienna to choose a storage cabinet for several boxes being moved out of the East Wing. Sienna opened the wrong closet and found the old metal medical case she had seen on her wedding night. Dr. Samuel Crest. She remembered Adrian closing the cabinet and telling her that the family liked locks. She should have shut the door. Instead, she noticed a prescription envelope lying on the bottom shelf. The date was 9 years old. The patient name was Adrian Valenti. Sienna picked it up by the edge. The medication meant nothing to her, but the clinic address beneath the physician's name caught her attention. Behind the envelope lay a thin payment receipt. It was not a medical bill. The header read Valenti Family Administrative Fund. The authorization line carried one name, Rocco Valenti. Sienna stared at the date. The payment had been made 3 months after Adrian said he received the diagnosis that ended any possibility of children. Looking for something. Adrian's voice came from the end of the hallway. She turned and held up the receipt. Apparently, his face changed when he saw Dr. Crest's name. Sienna walked toward him and handed over the paper. "Why was your uncle paying your doctor after your diagnosis?" Adrian read the receipt once. Then again, "I don't know." "Did you know he was paying him at all?" "No." Sienna watched him closely. This was not the controlled silence he used when refusing to answer her. This was surprise. Real surprise. "Adrian." He folded the receipt once. "Leave this with me." "No." His gaze lifted. Sienna's pulse accelerated, but she did not step back. No more locked boxes where everyone else decides what you're allowed to know. His voice became quieter. "This concerns me." "Yes, and you." She thought of Rocco at lunch, declaring that the marriage would never create a direct heir. She thought of the succession memorandum left beside her wedding contract. She thought of how often Rocco repeated Adrian's infertility as though repetition itself protected something. "It concerns the reason your uncle wanted me to marry you." Adrian's expression hardened. Sienna stepped closer. "You said your diagnosis was clear." "It was. You also said you never saw the original laboratory results." He said nothing. Sienna pointed at the receipt in his hand. "And now we know Rocco was paying the doctor afterward." "Sienna, what if the one thing this entire family treats as unquestionable is the thing somebody most needed you never to question?" Adrian looked down at the receipt. For the first time since Sienna had met him, the most powerful man in the Valenti family looked uncertain. Not frightened. Not yet. But something that had been sealed for 9 years had finally begun to crack. And Sienna understood that whatever lay behind it would not remain Adrian's private history for long. Because Rocco had built the future of the Valenti family around one certainty: Adrian Valenti would never have an heir. And somewhere inside the locked history of that diagnosis was a man who had been paid to make sure everyone believed it. By the 79th day of her marriage, Sienna Bellini had collected 4 explanations for why the smell of butter suddenly made her sick, and pregnancy was not one of them. Exhaustion made sense. Stress made even more sense. Eating half a lemon tart near midnight while correcting a wedding order had been irresponsible enough to deserve consequences. The 4th explanation was that Mrs. Conti had changed the coffee beans at the estate, because lately even Adrian's morning cup smelled too bitter. Sienna accepted each theory until she stood alone in the bakery office, opened the calendar on her phone, and counted backward twice. 36 days. She stared at the number until the screen dimmed. Her period was 6 days late. The fact should have frightened her because of what it might mean. Instead, it frightened her because of what everyone insisted it could not mean. Adrian had spent 9 years believing natural conception was impossible. Rocco repeated that belief like family law. The Valenti succession plan had been constructed around it. And now Sienna's own body was quietly contradicting all of them. She did not tell Adrian that evening. He found her in the estate kitchen after 10, sitting in front of tea. She had forgotten to drink, and stopped in the doorway. "You're quiet." Sienna glanced up. You say that like it's suspicious. With you, it is. He sat opposite her only after she gave the smallest nod. Over the previous weeks, their marriage had shifted into territory neither of them had named. The east and west wings still existed, but fewer nights ended with both doors closed. Their first kiss had happened in the bakery after midnight, when Adrian had looked at her for so long that she finally asked whether he intended to do something about it. He had still asked permission. Later, when she crossed the hallway to his room, the choice had been hers. That mattered because almost nothing about the beginning of their marriage had belonged to her. Now Adrian watched her over the table and asked, "Did something happen?" Sienna almost told him. Then she imagined his face when he heard the word pregnant and remembered the diagnosis he had trusted for 9 years. "Nothing happened," she said. Adrian's eyes narrowed. That was a bad lie. "You would know professionally." She smiled, despite herself, and his expression softened. He reached across the table, stopped before touching her hand, and left his palm resting on the wood between them. The small restraint made the secret heavier. Sienna needed certainty before she put an impossible question between them. 4 mornings later, Rocco summoned the family to breakfast to discuss the Marseille agreement. Sienna considered staying at Bellini Bakery until Adrian told her she did not have to attend. That made her suspicious enough to go. "You realize telling me I don't have to do something makes it sound as though you're hiding me," she said as they entered the dining room. Adrian pulled out her chair. "I'm trying to spare you, Rocco, before 8 in the morning. That is almost romantic. Don't tell anyone." Across the table, Luca looked tired, while his father arranged folders beside his plate. Mrs. Conti entered with the coffee service, and Sienna was still wondering whether Luca had slept at all when the smell reached her. Bitter, dark, suddenly unbearable. Her stomach rolled. The cup slipped from her hand and struck the plate with a crack that silenced the room. Coffee spread across the white linen as Sienna pushed back her chair, covered her mouth, and made it into the hallway before a violent dry heave folded her over the marble console. Adrian was beside her almost immediately. "Sienna," she breathed through her mouth and managed, "I'm fine." "You are very clearly not fine." An inspiring diagnosis. His hand settled against the middle of her back. Instinctive and gentle, and Sienna might have leaned into it if she had not noticed the silence behind them. She straightened. Rocco stood in the dining room entrance with Luca several steps behind him. Mrs. Conti had gone pale. Rocco's eyes moved from Sienna to Adrian's hand and back again, and what disturbed her was not that he understood the possibility. It was how quickly he understood it. "How long?" he asked. Adrian's expression hardened. How long would Rocco ignored him? "How long have you been sick in the mornings?" Sienna took the napkin Adrian offered. "I don't remember appointing you my physician." Rocco's mouth tightened. "Answer the question." "No," Adrian said, stepping slightly in front of her. "You don't question my wife." Rocco looked at his nephew. "Then perhaps you should," Luca murmured. "Father," but Rocco dismissed him with a glance. "We all know what your doctors said." Adrian's hand dropped from Sienna's back. "Enough." Rocco continued anyway. "If she is pregnant," Adrian's voice turned colder. "I said enough." The sentence was already in the room. Sienna looked at Adrian and saw the reaction she had spent 4 days fearing. Shock came first. Beneath it was something more painful. A question he had not chosen, but could not prevent himself from asking. Adrian dismissed the breakfast meeting. Rocco protested until Adrian looked at him and said, simply, "Leave." Luca followed his father, but paused beside Sienna long enough to whisper, "I'm sorry." Mrs. Conti cleared the staff from the room, and within minutes, Sienna and Adrian stood on opposite sides of the breakfast table with the spilled coffee between them. Adrian broke the silence. "Are you?" Sienna knew exactly what he meant. "I don't know." His brow tightened. "You don't know I'm late." "How late?" 6 days. Adrian looked away for 1 second too long. Sienna felt something tighten inside her. "Say it." He looked back. "Say what?" "The thing you're thinking." His hands closed around the back of a chair. "I'm thinking that I was told for 9 years this was impossible. And I'm thinking we found evidence that Rocco was paying the doctor who told me that. It should have reassured her. Then," he added, "we need to confirm whether you're pregnant." Sienna's face changed, and Adrian saw it. "That isn't an accusation." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "It sounds remarkably clinical. What would you prefer me to say?" "Maybe that you believe me." His jaw tightened. "Believe what you just told me. You don't know. Don't hide behind the wording." "I'm not." "Then say what happens if the test is positive." Adrian went silent. Sienna stared at him until the silence itself became an answer. "There it is." He moved around the table, but she stepped back before he reached her. That stopped him immediately. "Sienna, I have spent 9 years knowing I could never father a child." "Knowing?" she repeated, or believing the distinction struck him. She continued before he could answer. "You saw the receipt. You admitted you never saw the original laboratory results. But the moment my body becomes evidence, suddenly, there is another possibility." Adrian's voice roughened. "I didn't accuse you of betraying me. You didn't have to finish the sentence. And you had 4 days to consider this. I've had 5 minutes. That silenced her, because it was true, even if it did not erase the hurt. Adrian exhaled slowly. "I am asking for time to understand what is happening. I am not asking you to prove your fidelity." Sienna looked toward the ruined breakfast table. "From this side, those things feel very similar." He absorbed the words without defending himself. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Then I'm sorry." Adrian Valenti apologized, as if the words had sharp edges. But he said them. Sienna looked at him. "I still want confirmation," he added. She almost laughed from frustration. "Of course you do. For you as much as for me." And if it's positive, Adrian's gaze dropped briefly toward her abdomen before returning to her face. "Then everything changes." Sienna shook her head. "That is exactly what I'm afraid of." His expression tightened. "What do you want me to promise?" "Nothing yet. That's the point. I don't want everyone deciding what happens to me before I even know what is happening inside me." Adrian was silent for a moment, then nodded. "All right." A private physician arrived 40 minutes later. Sienna hated that Adrian could produce a doctor faster than most people could obtain a dinner reservation. But she hated the idea of walking into a public clinic, surrounded by Valenti security even more. She insisted on speaking to the physician alone. Adrian agreed without argument and waited outside. The blood draw took less than a minute. The waiting took almost 2 hours. Sienna spent most of them in the library, standing before the locked cabinet that contained Adrian's old medical records. When he finally entered, he remained near the door. "What belongs to you?" he asked. Sienna turned. What he nodded toward her. "If the result is positive, what part of this belongs to me?" The question surprised her. Her hand moved instinctively toward her abdomen. "The truth belongs to you, and the decisions about my body. Mine first." Adrian nodded, and after that, Sienna studied him. "If you are the father, you get a voice, not ownership." Something passed through his expression. Painful, but accepting. Fair. She almost told him that fairness was easy before fear arrived. But the physician entered, carrying a tablet. "Mrs. Valenti, the test is positive." The room became so quiet that Sienna heard the faint click of the clock on the mantel. She gripped the edge of the desk. Adrian did not move. The doctor continued. Based on the dates you gave me, approximately 5 weeks. We'll confirm dating later with an ultrasound. 5 weeks. Sienna looked at Adrian. She knew exactly which night that meant. Apparently he did too, because the color left his face. The physician continued speaking about prenatal vitamins, follow-up blood work, and warning signs. But the rest became background noise. 5 weeks placed conception inside their marriage. Inside a night, Sienna remembered precisely because Adrian had asked twice whether she was certain before touching her. When the doctor left, Adrian remained by the window. 5 weeks, he said. Yes, he turned. I know when. So do we. For one unguarded moment, the man who controlled rooms simply looked stunned. There was no calculation in his face. No suspicion. Only the destabilizing possibility that something he had mourned years ago had never been impossible at all. The library door opened without a knock. Rocco entered. Adrian changed instantly. Get out. Rocco ignored him and looked at the medical folder on the desk. You confirmed it. Sienna's skin went cold. How did you know the doctor was here? He did not answer, which was answer enough. Adrian stepped between them. I told you to leave. Rocco's gaze remained on Sienna. If she is pregnant, this is no longer a private matter. Sienna laughed once. There it is. Rocco continued. The child changes succession. The child is 5 weeks old, Sienna said. At this point, it doesn't even know your succession exists. The bloodline does not care. Adrian's voice became dangerously calm. My child is not a succession document. The words stopped Sienna for half a heartbeat. My child. Rocco heard them too, but where Sienna heard a choice beginning to form, he heard a threat to everything he had planned. Your doctors said you were sterile. Rocco said. Infertile. Sienna corrected. Those aren't automatically the same thing, and even your own version was apparently less absolute than you've spent years claiming. Rocco's eyes snapped toward her with irritation so immediate that she noticed it. Adrian noticed too. Either the doctors were wrong, he said, or someone made sure I believed they were. Rocco's face remained controlled. Be careful what you imply. I'm past implying. Rocco looked at Sienna. Before anyone discusses altered records, paternity should be established. Adrian's expression went empty in the way Sienna had learned meant his anger was at its most dangerous. Leave. Rocco did not. It is the obvious question. If you allow emotion to replace, Adrian took one step forward. Rocco stopped. For the first time, Sienna saw him. Remember that Adrian was not merely his nephew. He was the man everyone else in the house obeyed. Rocco left without another word. Adrian did not follow him. Sienna waited until the door closed. You didn't answer him. I don't owe him an answer. She held his gaze. Do you want one? He understood immediately. A paternity test. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at her. No. Sienna said nothing. I had 5 minutes this morning. He continued. I've had 3 hours now. If I demand that you prove you didn't betray me before I investigate a lie I already know exists, then I become exactly what Rocco expects me to be. The hurt inside Sienna did not disappear, but it changed. Adrian walked to the medical cabinet, removed a key from his pocket, and held it toward her. What are you doing? She asked. You were right. That must hurt. More than you know. Despite everything. Her mouth twitched. Adrian placed the key in her palm. No more locked boxes where other people decide what I am allowed to know. Together they opened the cabinet. Most of the contents were useless old prescriptions, discharge instructions from Adrian's injury, insurance correspondence, receipts. Sienna sat on the carpet while Adrian sorted through the second box. Halfway down, She found a photocopied laboratory summary and stopped. Adrian. He took the page. At the bottom, beneath a column of test values, neither of them fully understood, was the conclusion. Severe male factor infertility. Natural conception considered highly unlikely. Sienna read the final 3 words again. Highly unlikely. Adrian stared at them. Not impossible. No. Yet Rocco had always said impossible. Eventually, Adrian had said it too. Repetition had hardened probability into certainty. Sienna examined the header. The laboratory test was dated March 14th. Dr. Samuel Crest's signature appeared beneath a date of March 16th. Then, in tiny print, at the bottom of the copied report, she saw a 3rd line. Document, modified March 21st. She touched Adrian's arm. Look. He followed her finger. His expression sharpened. 5 days after Crest signed it, Sienna reached for the old prescription envelope they had found earlier and placed it beside the report. The physician's printed identification number matched. The signatures did not. Crest's signature on the prescription ended in a sharp upward stroke. The signature on the infertility report flattened into a short line. Adrian stared at them side by side. These aren't the same. No. So either someone signed for him. Sienna looked at the modification date. Or someone changed what he signed. Neither spoke for several seconds. Outside the library, the Valenti estate continued operating as though nothing fundamental had shifted. Phones rang. Doors opened and closed. Somewhere downstairs, Rocco was almost certainly transforming Sienna's pregnancy into a political problem. But sitting on the carpet beside Adrian, Sienna understood that the pregnancy was not the mystery. She rested one hand lightly over her abdomen. That morning she had thought the impossible thing was the child growing inside her. Now, the impossible thing was 9 years of certainty collapsing because of 3 words. 1 altered date, and a signature that did not belong where it had been placed. Adrian lowered himself onto the floor beside her. For once, he did not reach for a phone, summon a lawyer, or order someone to solve the problem. He simply looked at the report. I built my life around this. Sienna heard something in his voice she had never heard before. Grief. Not for the child they might now have, but for the years in which he had refused to imagine one. Then don't build the next part around another assumption, she said. Adrian looked at her. His gaze dropped toward the hand resting over her abdomen, then returned to her face. What do we build it around? Sienna thought of Rocco demanding paternity, of the family treating a 5-week pregnancy as an heir before it was even a heartbeat they had heard, and of Adrian asking what part of the decision belonged to him. The truth, she said, but this time we find it ourselves. The altered report lay between them. For 9 years, the Valenti family had treated Adrian's infertility as the one fact nobody needed to question. Rocco had built a succession plan around it. Adrian had built emotional walls around it. Even Sienna had accepted it when she signed a marriage contract that was never supposed to produce an heir. Now she was pregnant, and someone had modified the document that said she never could be. The first thing Adrian did after discovering the altered report was not confront Rocco. That surprised Sienna more than anger would have. Adrian spent the next morning at the bakery's corner table with a coffee he barely touched, while 2 people he trusted searched for Dr. Samuel Crest. To everyone else, he looked like a husband waiting for his wife to finish work. Sienna knew better. Every few minutes his phone lit up, and each time he read the message without changing expression. By 9, the breakfast rush had ended. Sienna carried a plate with an almond croissant to his table and sat opposite him. Anything, Adrian shook his head. Crest sold his practice 7 years ago. No current medical license under that name in the state. No tax records after the sale. Sienna frowned. People don't disappear, Because they retire? No. So either he left the country, changed his name, or somebody helped him vanish. Adrian finally picked up the coffee. There is a fourth possibility. She knew what he meant and disliked how calmly he said it. We're not assuming he's dead. I'm not assuming anything anymore. Sienna looked at the untouched pastry. Good. Start by eating that. Apparently I'm carrying the only Valenti who currently understands breakfast. Adrian looked at her abdomen before he could stop himself. The pregnancy was still invisible, yet Sienna had begun catching him doing that several times a day, as though expecting evidence to appear if he looked long enough. She broke off a piece of croissant and pushed the plate toward him. You can ask. His eyes returned to hers. Ask what? Whatever question is making you stare at my stomach like it owes you money. Adrian almost smiled, then became serious. How do you feel? It was so ordinary that she had not expected it. Tired, hungry, until food arrives. Then offended by it. Coffee is now my enemy, which may be the cruelest part. The doctor said nausea is common. I was there. I know. You read the instructions twice. 3 times. Sienna started. Of course you did. He broke off a piece of pastry. There were 6 pages. You run a criminal organization. Adrian, surely you've encountered pregnancy before. Not one I was responsible for. The words settled between them. Sienna watched him carefully. You're saying that more easily now. What? Responsible for? He understood. My child. Yes. Adrian looked toward the window. I decided something. That sentence has historically been dangerous for me. I won't let Rocco turn this into a trial about you. Sienna leaned back. And if the evidence eventually says you're not the father, the question hurt them both. But she needed to hear the answer. Adrian met her eyes. Then we deal with truth when we have truth. I won't manufacture betrayal because someone else finds it convenient. The investigation produced its first real break that afternoon. Luca arrived at the bakery alone, wearing jeans and a gray coat instead of the suits his father preferred. Sienna was glazing fruit tarts when he took a stool at the counter. If you're here for a succession meeting, we're out of chairs. Luca gave a tired smile. I'm here because my father thinks I'm at the port. Adrian appeared from the office behind her. Why aren't you? Luca's smile vanished. He placed a small envelope on the counter. Because I found this. Inside was a copy of a transfer authorization from the Valenti Family Administrative Fund. The payment matched the amount on Dr. Crest's receipt. But this document included a memo field. The other copy did not. Consultation, succession, medical review. Adrian read it twice. Where did you get this? My father's old accounting archive. Luca glanced toward the bakery windows. He moved most of his records after your father died. But some backups stayed on a server nobody uses. Sienna looked at him. Why help us? Luca's jaw tightened. Because I am tired of being discussed like a replacement part. If my father lied to you so I could inherit something I never asked for, I want to know. Adrian slid the document back into the envelope. Does Rocco know you accessed the archive? Not yet. He will. Luca nodded. Probably. Sienna wiped her hands and came around the counter. Then you shouldn't go back to him alone. Both men looked at her. What she asked. Adrian's expression said he disliked the idea, but knew she was right. Luca shook his head. If I suddenly disappear into Adrian's house, my father knows exactly where I stand. He already will when he checks the access logs. Luca looked at Adrian. She always like this, usually worse. Sienna pointed a pastry brush at him. Careful. For one brief second. The tension eased. Then Luca reached into his coat again and removed a folded page. There's more. Crest wasn't the only doctor paid through that account. Adrian unfolded the list. 3 physicians appeared over a period of 18 months following his injury. One was the surgeon who treated him. Another was Dr. Crest. The third name was unfamiliar. Dr. Elias Mercer. Reproductive endocrinology. Sienna read the specialty twice. Did you ever see Mercer? Adrian shook his head. Luca said, according to the payment record. He reviewed your case 6 weeks after Crest's diagnosis. Adrian's eyes hardened. I was never told there was a second review. Maybe because somebody didn't like what it said. Sienna replied. Luca tapped the bottom of the page. Mercer is alive. Adrian looked up. Where Boston? Private fertility practice. Same name. Same medical license number. Sienna felt the entire mystery contract around one living person. Adrian was already reaching for his phone when she caught his wrist. Don't send anyone. His eyes narrowed. Why? Because if Rocco has been watching this for 9 years, the fastest way to scare Mercer is to have Valenti men appear outside his office. Luca nodded. She's right. Adrian looked between them. This is becoming an unpleasant pattern. What Sienna asked. Both of you telling me I'm wrong. Character building, she said. They called Mercer from the bakery office using Sienna's phone. Adrian hated the idea, which was exactly why she insisted. A receptionist answered and said the doctor did not discuss old cases without records and identification. Sienna expected Adrian to announce his name and make the problem worse. Instead, he said, tell him the patient is Adrian Valenti and the file involved Samuel Crest. There was a pause on the line. The receptionist asked them to hold. 2 minutes later, a man's voice replaced hers. Mr. Valenti. Adrian put the phone on speaker. Yes. Mercer did not ask how they found him. His first question was, is Samuel alive? Adrian and Sienna exchanged a look. We don't know. Adrian said. Mercer exhaled. Then why are you calling me? Sienna leaned closer. Because I'm Adrian's wife. I'm pregnant. And somebody altered the medical report that told him that couldn't happen. Silence followed. Then Mercer said something that made Adrian's face go completely still. I wondered when this would come back. Mercer refused to explain over the phone. He agreed to meet them the following morning, but only if Adrian came without security inside the office. Sienna expected an argument. Adrian agreed. The drive to Boston took hours, and for most of it, Sienna slept with her head against the passenger window while Adrian drove, rather than trust anyone else with the route. They reached the city after dark and stayed at a hotel under names Sienna suspected were not entirely legitimate. At 3 a.m, nausea woke her. She barely reached the bathroom before vomiting. Adrian appeared behind her moments later, barefoot and half awake. He held her hair back without speaking. When it passed, Sienna sat on the floor with her back against the bathtub. Adrian handed her water and lowered himself beside her. This is glamorous, she muttered. I was promised a mafia marriage. There should be diamonds, not crackers. He opened the packet the doctor had told him to carry. You rejected the diamonds. They were too large. That is not a complaint I've heard before. She took a cracker. You know what I mean. Adrian watched her eat. After a while, Sienna asked, Are you afraid? He did not pretend to misunderstand. Yes, of the baby, of wanting it. Her hand stopped. Adrian looked at the bathroom floor. For 9 years I made peace with never having this. If Mercer tells me tomorrow that the diagnosis was manipulated, I don't know whether I'll be relieved or furious. Sienna rested her head against the tub. You can be both. He looked at her. And you, I'm afraid, everyone is going to care more about what this baby means than what it is. What is it? Adrian asked. Sienna placed a hand over her still flat stomach. Urs, if we're lucky. Dr. Elias Mercer was 62, silver-haired, and visibly unhappy to see Adrian. His office occupied the top floor of a discreet medical building overlooking the river. He locked the consultation room door himself after Sienna and Adrian entered. "I kept copies," he said. Before either of them sat down, Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Of my records. Of my opinion." Mercer opened a file drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "Samuel Crest contacted me 9 years ago because your semen analysis was abnormal after extensive pelvic trauma. He wanted a second opinion before giving you a permanent prognosis." Adrian said nothing. Mercer continued. "My conclusion was severe temporary impairment with uncertain recovery. I recommended repeat testing at 6 months and again at 1 year." Sienna felt Adrian go rigid beside her. "Temporary," she repeated. Mercer nodded. "Potentially. I never examined Mr. Valenti directly, so I could not guarantee recovery. But nothing I saw justified telling a 25-year-old man that natural conception was impossible for life." Adrian's voice was almost expressionless. "Why was I never told?" Mercer looked at him for a long moment. "Because 3 days after I sent my opinion to Crest, a man named Rocco Valenti came to my office." Sienna's stomach turned for a reason that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Mercer continued. "He told me the family needed certainty. I told him medicine doesn't work that way. He offered to pay me to sign a revised opinion stating permanent infertility. I refused." Adrian's hands remained still on his knees. "And Crest Samuel called me afterward. He was frightened. He said he had been pressured to finalize the report without follow-up testing." "Did he?" "I don't know. He stopped returning my calls. 6 months later, I received a letter stating that the matter had been resolved and my services were no longer required." Mercer opened the envelope and placed a copy of his original consultation on the desk. The conclusion was exactly as he had described. Fertility significantly impaired following trauma. Prognosis indeterminate. Repeat testing strongly recommended. Sienna read the page, then looked at Adrian. He had gone frighteningly quiet. "You could have recovered naturally," she said. Mercer answered for him. "Yes, it is entirely possible." Adrian finally looked at the doctor. "Entirely possible is not proof that I did. No. A current fertility evaluation could establish whether your parameters recovered, though it cannot prove paternity by itself." Adrian nodded once. "Do it." Mercer hesitated. "Today. Now." Sienna touched Adrian's arm. "You don't have to prove anything to Rocco." He looked at her. "I'm not doing it for Rocco." His gaze shifted to the old report. "I'm doing it because I should have been allowed to know my own body 9 years ago." The preliminary results arrived that afternoon. Mercer called them back into his office and placed the report on the desk without ceremony. Adrian's current analysis was not normal in every category, but it was unequivocal on the question that had governed his life. Viable sperm were present. Natural conception was possible. Sienna read the line once, then again. Adrian did not touch the report. Mercer said quietly, "Whatever prognosis you were given 9 years ago, you are not sterile." Adrian stared at the paper. Sienna expected anger. Instead, he laughed once. A broken sound with no humor in it. 9 years. Mercer lowered his eyes. Sienna reached for Adrian's hand. This time he took hers immediately. They returned to the Valenti estate after midnight. Rocco was waiting in the library. Luca stood near the fireplace. That was wrong. Sienna knew it before Adrian closed the door behind them. Luca's face was bruised along one cheek, and Rocco held the copied transfer authorization in one hand. "Your cousin has been stealing private records," Rocco said. Adrian's attention went to Luca. "Did he do that to you?" Luca answered, before his father could. "I'm fine. That wasn't the question." Rocco threw the document onto the desk. "He broke into confidential family archives and handed them to your wife." Sienna stepped forward. He handed them to Adrian. Rocco's eyes moved to her. You should be resting. You should stop telling pregnant women what to do. It isn't going well for you. Adrian placed Mercer's original consultation beside the transfer authorization. Rocco's expression changed by less than a fraction, but Sienna saw it. Elias Mercer, Adrian said. Rocco did not touch the page. I don't remember every doctor involved in your recovery. He remembers you. Silence. Adrian continued. He remembers you visiting his office. He remembers you offering him money to sign a permanent infertility diagnosis. Rocco's face remained controlled. A doctor's recollection after 9 years is not evidence. Adrian placed the current laboratory result beside the old consultation. Then try this. Rocco read it. For the first time since Sienna had known him, he lost control of his expression. Only for a second. It was enough. Luca looked at his father. You knew. Rocco recovered. I knew Adrian's injury created instability in the succession. Your grandfather was dying. The family needed a plan. Adrian's voice went very quiet. So you decided I would never have children. I decided we could not build the future around a possibility. You paid doctors. I paid for certainty. Sienna felt cold spread through her. There is no difference to you. Is there? Rocco looked at her. You don't understand what the family was facing. No, I understand perfectly. Adrian's body gave you an uncertainty, so you converted it into a fact that benefited you. Luca stepped away from the fireplace. Benefited me. Rocco turned. Everything I did was for this family. You mean for your branch of it? You were positioned to succeed, Adrian. Luca laughed bitterly. Positioned. You built my entire life around replacing him. Rocco's patience snapped. Because somebody had to be prepared, Adrian moved before the argument could escalate, placing himself between father and son. Enough. Rocco looked at him. You think a pregnancy solves this? It creates a larger problem. Every rival family now has a reason to question whether the child is yours. Every ambitious man inside our organization has a reason to choose a side. You need certainty. Adrian, whether you like the word or not. Sienna saw it then. Rocco still believed he was the only adult in the room, even exposed. He was trying to turn his manipulation into necessity. Adrian looked at the man who had shaped 9 years of his life with a lie. You're right about one thing. Rocco waited. I need certainty. Adrian picked up Mercer's report. So tomorrow, an independent laboratory will repeat the fertility test. My attorney will obtain every surviving record from Crest's practice. Luca will give a formal statement about the accounting archive, and you will surrender access to every Valenti account until I know exactly what else you purchased in the name of certainty. Rocco's face hardened. You cannot remove me over an old medical dispute. This stopped being a medical dispute when you falsified the future of this family. You don't know that I falsified anything. Adrian's gaze became cold. Then you should be eager for me to investigate. Rocco looked toward Sienna. It was a small movement, but Adrian caught it. Don't, he said. Rocco's eyes returned to him. Don't what? Look at her as if she caused this. Adrian stepped closer. You wanted me married to a woman you believed could never give me an heir because the marriage settled a debt without changing your succession plan. You miscalculated. That is not her crime. Rocco's jaw tightened. You are letting sentiment weaken you. Adrian's expression did not change. No, I'm discovering how often you used that sentence whenever I got close to making a decision you couldn't control. Rocco left the library without another word. Luca remained. Adrian looked at his bruised cheek. You're staying here tonight. Luca started to object, then stopped. Fine. Sienna looked at him. That was remarkably easy. Luca touched his cheek. I've had a long day. For the first time, the three of them laughed. though none of them found anything particularly funny. Later, in their bedroom, Sienna stood before the window while Adrian removed his jacket. She had crossed into his room without thinking when they came upstairs. The realization struck both of them at approximately the same time. Adrian placed the jacket over a chair. "You can still use the east wing." Sienna looked at him. "Are you asking me to leave? Then stop offering exits every time you're afraid I might feel trapped." He became still. She walked closer. "I know where the door is." Adrian's gaze searched hers. "Today was a lot. That is a very restrained description. I'm trying something new. How is it going, poorly?" Sienna took his hand and placed it against her abdomen. There was nothing to feel yet. No movement. No visible change. Adrian's palm rested there as though touching something sacred and terrifying. Mercer said possible. She whispered. The current test said possible. Adrian looked down at his hand. "I know. You still don't have proof this baby is yours." His eyes lifted immediately. "Sienna, I need to say it." He waited. "Rocco will keep using that uncertainty. Maybe others will too. We can do a paternity test when it's medically appropriate if we decide we need one. But I won't spend this pregnancy defending myself every time somebody wants leverage over you." Adrian's hand remained where she had placed it. "You won't." "That's a promise, yes. Careful. I keep those. So do I." His phone rang. Neither moved at first. Then Adrian answered. Marco's voice was loud enough that Sienna heard urgency without understanding the words. Adrian's expression changed. When a pause. "And you're certain?" Another pause. His gaze went to Sienna. "Send me the address. Nobody approaches until I get there." He ended the call. "What happened?" Adrian looked at the old medical file they had brought back from Boston. They found Samuel Crest. Sienna's heart kicked hard. "Alive." "Yes." Relief lasted less than a second. Adrian continued. "He contacted one of our attorneys tonight. He says he'll explain what happened to my report." Sienna studied his face. "What's the catch?" Adrian's phone lit again with the address. "He refuses to speak unless you come too." Sienna looked down at the hand she had placed over their child. 9 years ago, Samuel Crest had signed or failed to sign the document that turned Adrian's uncertain prognosis into a permanent sentence. Rocco had paid him. Mercer had refused to cooperate. Somewhere between those facts was the truth they had been chasing since the night Sienna found the first receipt. Now the missing doctor wanted to talk, and for reasons neither of them understood. He wanted to talk to Sienna. Samuel Crest chose a church basement on the edge of the city for the meeting, which Sienna thought was either deeply appropriate or painfully theatrical. Rain had begun before dawn, turning the narrow street silver beneath the lamps. Adrian parked across from the church and looked at her before switching off the engine. "You can stay in the car." Sienna stared at him. "We discussed this." "I know. And I'm discovering that knowing you have a choice does not prevent me from wishing you'd choose the safest one." She unfastened her seatbelt. "That's progress. Annoying progress. But progress." Adrian did not smile. His eyes moved briefly toward her abdomen. "If anything feels wrong, we leave." "Agreed. If Crest asks you to go somewhere alone, no. If Rocco appears, we leave." Adrian nodded. Sienna touched his hand. "You're allowed to be afraid without turning it into an order." His fingers closed around hers. "I'm working on it." They crossed the street together. Samuel Crest looked older than the photograph attached to his medical license. He sat at a folding table beneath fluorescent lights, shoulders rounded inside a brown coat, with a leather document case on the chair beside him. No guards waited with him. No dramatic confession had been prepared. He simply looked tired. When Adrian entered, Crest stood, and then seemed to think better of offering his hand. "Mr. Valenti." Adrian remained near the door. "You asked for my wife." Crest looked at Sienna. "I did." "Why?" Sienna asked. Crest's eyes dropped for a moment. "Because if I spoke only to him, I was afraid the truth would become another Valenti dispute. I needed someone in the room whose future was changed by what I did, but who wasn't part of the family when I did it." Sienna felt Adrian tense beside her. "Then talk." Crest opened the leather case and removed a thin folder. "Your original testing after the injury showed severe impairment," he told Adrian. "That part was real. I believed natural conception was unlikely at the time, but I did not believe we could call the condition permanent. I sent the results to Elias Mercer because he had more experience with fertility after trauma." Adrian's expression did not move. "We met Mercer." Crest closed his eyes briefly. "Then you know what he recommended." "Repeat testing." "Yes." Crest pushed the folder across the table. Inside was a copy of Mercer's consultation, followed by another page Sienna had never seen. The heading carried Crest's clinic name. The conclusion read prognosis uncertain. Repeat evaluation required before permanent diagnosis. Sienna looked at the signature. This one matched the prescription envelope. "This was your original report." Crest nodded. "Yes." Adrian turned the next page. It was the altered report they had already found, but this copy contained handwritten notes in the margin. Crest's face tightened. "Rocco came to see me 2 days after Mercer refused him. He said your grandfather's health was failing and the family needed an uncontested succession structure. He wanted the report changed from uncertain fertility to permanent infertility." Adrian's voice was flat. "And you did it." Crest looked down. "Yes." Sienna felt ennui rise, but Adrian remained frighteningly still. Why, Crest swallowed. "Because he knew about my debts. Gambling. Taxes. He offered enough money to clear them. And when I refused the first time, he showed me photographs of my daughter leaving school." Sienna's anger did not disappear, but it became more complicated. Crest continued. "I changed the summary. I removed Mercer's recommendation for follow-up. I told myself you were already badly injured. That conception was unlikely, anyway. That I was changing probability into certainty, rather than inventing something from nothing." Adrian's gaze hardened. "You stole 9 years from me because the lie was close enough to the truth for you to sleep at night." Crest flinched. "Yes." Sienna looked at the folder. "Why keep copies?" Crest gave a hollow laugh. "Cowardice. Insurance. Guilt. Pick one." He reached into the case and removed a small external drive. Rocco made payments through the administrative fund, but one transfer came from an account controlled directly by him. I kept the statement. I also kept a recording. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "A recording of what?" "The second meeting. After I changed the report, I panicked. I recorded him when he came back to make sure the follow-up reminders had been removed." Crest placed the drive on the table. "He says why he wanted it done." Sienna stared at the small black object. "Why didn't you come forward?" "Because I was afraid." Then Samuel Crest stopped being a practicing doctor, and I convinced myself the damage was finished. His eyes moved to her abdomen until I saw the news about your breakfast. Sienna stiffened. There was news. Adrian's expression darkened. Crest nodded. "Not public news. Family circles. People talk. A Valenti wife getting sick at breakfast when everyone knows her husband is infertile. That kind of rumor travels." Adrian looked toward the door as though he could already see every person who had carried the story. Sienna caught his sleeve. "Lauter." He looked at her. She nodded toward Crest. "Finish this first." Adrian returned his attention to the doctor. "Why insist she come?" Crest looked directly at Sienna. "Because Rocco will say I was bought by Adrian. He will say Mercer was bought too." He will turn every document into a contest of power, but he cannot explain the pregnancy without attacking you. I wanted you to understand that when he does, it will not be because the evidence is weak. It will be because you are the evidence he cannot control. By noon, Adrian's attorneys had authenticated enough of Crest's documents to make the situation dangerous for Rocco, but not decisive. The recording was clear. Rocco's voice could be heard telling Crest that Adrian's uncertainty ends here and that a man without a direct heir creates a clean succession. What the recording did not contain was an explicit order to falsify the medical report. Rocco had been careful even 9 years earlier. The payments, Mercer's testimony, Crest's confession, and the altered file formed a devastating pattern, but Adrian's attorney warned that inside the Valenti council, pattern and proof were not the same thing. Rocco still controlled several senior members, and he had already called an emergency council meeting for that evening. Sienna stood in the estate library while Adrian's attorney explained the problem. If we present everything now, the attorney said, Rocco will argue that Crest changed the report independently and later extorted him. He'll say the payments were legitimate consultation expenses. Mercer can prove Rocco offered him money, but not what happened with Crest. Adrian's jaw tightened, and the recording suggestive, not explicit. Sienna looked at the evidence spread across the desk. This was supposed to be the moment the truth won. Instead, truth had arrived carrying footnotes. So we lose, she asked. The attorney hesitated. You may not lose control of the family, but Rocco can survive this. More importantly, he can force the council to treat the pregnancy as disputed until paternity is established. Adrian's expression went cold. No, legally, he has no authority over Mrs. Valenti's medical decisions. Politically, however, I said no. Sienna touched Adrian's arm. Let him finish. The attorney continued carefully. Rocco intends to propose a temporary succession committee. He will argue that until the child's paternity and viability are established, Luca remains presumptive successor and Rocco should oversee continuity. Sienna almost laughed. So after everything, he still gets what he wanted. Temporarily, the attorney said. Temporary arrangements have a habit of becoming permanent around here. She replied. Adrian looked at her. She saw the instinct in him before he spoke. Remove Rocco. Lock the council down. Use force if necessary. The old Adrian would have called that protection. Sienna shook her head. Don't. His eyes narrowed. Don't what win his way. Silence settled over the library. The council assembled at 7 in the long dining room, where Sienna's morning sickness had exposed the first crack in Rocco's plan. 12 senior members sat around the table. Luca took a chair near the far end rather than beside his father. Sienna entered with Adrian, and every conversation stopped. She hated the way several eyes dropped automatically toward her abdomen. Nothing showed yet. Still, the room already treated her body like territory. Rocco stood at the opposite end. His composure had returned completely. This meeting concerns succession and family security, he said. Sienna pulled out a chair beside Adrian. Rocco's gaze sharpened. It does not require Sienna's presence. She sat. Then stop making proposals about my child. Adrian took the chair beside her. Rocco's mouth tightened, but he continued. For the next 20 minutes, evidence became argument. Adrian's attorney presented the original medical opinion, the altered report, the payment records, Mercer's statement, and Crest's confession. Rocco denied ordering falsification. He admitted paying Crest but described the money as consultation fees. He admitted visiting Mercer but claimed he had merely sought certainty for succession planning. When the recording played, several council members shifted uncomfortably. Yet Rocco remained calm. I wanted clarity, he said when it ended. Adrian had nearly died. His father was ill. We could not leave the future of hundreds of people dependent on a medical maybe. Adrian looked at him. So, you turned maybe into never. I did not alter the report. You paid the man who did. That is not the same thing. Sienna watched the room and realized the plan was failing. Not because anyone believed Rocco innocent. They did not. But several men around the table understood his logic too well. They had built their lives on the same principle. Uncertainty was danger. Control was safety. Rocco saw it and pressed harder. Now we have another uncertainty. Sienna is pregnant. Adrian's new test shows conception is possible. But possible is not paternity. Until that question is resolved. We cannot restructure succession around an unborn child whose place in this family has not been established. Adrian started to rise. Sienna caught his hand beneath the table. He looked at her. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Rocco continued. Sensing advantage. I propose a temporary succession committee. Luca remains designated successor until paternity is medically established. And all decisions affecting the future heir, if there is one, must be reviewed by the council. Sienna's grip on Adrian's hand tightened. There it was, all decisions affecting the future heir. Not merely succession. Her pregnancy, her appointments, her movements, her child. Adrian stood anyway. No. Rocco smiled faintly. You cannot reject a council vote because you dislike the wording. Watch me. Several men shifted. The room was one sentence away from becoming something none of them could reverse. Then Luca spoke. I reject the nomination. Rocco turned slowly. What? Luca stood at the far end of the table. You keep saying I remain designated successor. I don't. Rocco's face changed. Sit down. No. Luca. You built this around me, without ever asking whether I wanted it. Rocco's voice hardened. This is not about what you want. Luca laughed once. That's the first honest thing you've said tonight. The room went silent. Luca walked toward the center of the table and placed a folder in front of the council. Those are copies of every payment from my father's private succession accounts for the last 10 years. Crest isn't the only person on the list. Rocco went pale. Adrian's attention sharpened. Luca continued. Investigators, lawyers, council consultants, people paid to produce recommendations supporting my succession. Maybe every payment has an innocent explanation. Maybe not. But if you want a temporary committee, start by explaining why half the people advising it have taken money from you. Rocco stared at his son. You have no idea what you've done. I think I finally do. Sienna understood then that evidence alone had never been enough to defeat Rocco, because Rocco's power was not built on one falsified report. It was built on everyone accepting the role he assigned them. Adrian was the infertile leader. Luca was the replacement. Sienna was the harmless political wife. The unborn child was the disputed asset. Rocco remained powerful only while everyone kept playing. Sienna stood. Every eye turned toward her. I will not submit my pregnancy to this council, she said. Rocco opened his mouth. But she continued. You can debate leadership. You can audit accounts. You can argue about whatever rules you've used to keep this family functioning. But my medical care is not one of those rules. My body is not a Valenti asset. And this child does not belong to a committee. One of the older council members frowned. Mrs. Valenti. No one is claiming ownership. Sienna looked at him. Then remove the language requiring council review of decisions affecting the heir. He looked toward Rocco. That hesitation proved her point. Adrian rose beside her. Sienna felt the room brace for a threat. He gave them something else. Remove the heir entirely. Rocco started. What? Adrian looked around the table. My child will not be designated successor at birth. No automatic title. No automatic claim. If, when grown, that child wants a place in this family. That choice will be theirs. Murmurs broke out. Rocco looked genuinely stunned. You would throw away the direct bloodline because your wife is uncomfortable. Adrian's expression remained calm. No, I am ending the weapon you used against both of us. Without a direct heir, succession remains unresolved. Then resolve leadership by competence instead of infancy. The statement struck the room harder than shouting could have. Rocco looked almost offended by the concept. This family has survived through blood. Adrian shook his head. This family survived because people did the work. Blood only gave them permission. Sienna looked at him. This was the cost the old Adrian would never have accepted. He was giving up the easiest way to secure his line, his authority, and his child's future position. He was choosing uncertainty, the very thing Rocco had spent 9 years trying to eliminate. The council members began withdrawing support from the temporary committee. Some did it because Luca had exposed Rocco's payments. Others did it because Adrian's decision removed the immediate succession crisis Rocco had used to justify control. When the final vote came, the committee failed, 8-4. A second motion suspended Rocco from financial and advisory authority pending a full audit. That vote passed 9-3. Rocco did not move when the result was announced. For the first time, nobody waited for him to explain what it meant. He looked at Luca. You chose them over your father. Luca's face tightened. No, I chose not to become you. Rocco turned to Adrian. And you think this woman made you stronger? Adrian glanced at Sienna. She made me notice that I kept confusing control with strength. Rocco's gaze settled on her last. You walked into this family with a debt, and now you think you've changed it. Sienna shook her head. No, I walked into this family because men like you thought debt gave them the right to choose my life. I'm simply done cooperating. Rocco left the dining room alone. No guards followed him. No one stopped him. The silence after the door closed felt different from every silence Sienna had experienced in the Valenti estate. It was not fear. It was absence, the strange emptiness left when a man who had occupied too much space finally lost the power to define the room. 3 weeks later, the independent audit confirmed that Rocco had paid Crest from both family and private accounts. Crest gave a sworn statement. Mercer did the same. Adrian's repeat fertility testing confirmed the Boston results. The council removed Rocco permanently from financial authority, and prosecutors outside the family began reviewing the falsified medical documents and related payments. Adrian refused to interfere with that process. When one of his men asked whether Rocco should be handled privately, Adrian answered, no. Sienna heard about it afterward and understood how much the single word meant. The pregnancy continued without consulting the Valenti council. Sienna kept working at Bellini Bakery. Though Adrian developed the irritating habit of appearing during the morning rush with crackers in his coat pocket, Marco still provided security. But he bought coffee now and had become popular with 3 elderly customers who believed he was merely an unusually serious accountant. Luca began helping Adrian restructure the family's legitimate businesses, not as designated successor, but because, as he told Sienna, he was apparently good at something besides being threatened with inheritance. One morning, Sienna found Adrian in the kitchen staring suspiciously at the coffee machine. What did it do? She asked. He looked at her. Nothing. You look like you're planning its execution. You still can't stand the smell. That isn't the coffee machine's moral failure. Adrian picked up the bag of beans and moved it toward a cabinet farther away. Sienna laughed. You know I'm going to smell it from there, too. I am solving a problem. You're relocating a problem 6 feet. He looked at the cabinet, reconsidered, and put the coffee back. Sienna smiled. Growth. Don't become ambitious. She walked toward him, took his hand, and placed it against the slight curve that had finally begun to show beneath her shirt. Adrian went still. He did that every time. No matter how many doctors confirmed the pregnancy, some part of him still seemed surprised that he was allowed to believe in it. The doctor said everything looks good. Sienna told him, "I know. You asked her twice. 3 times. Of course you did." His thumb moved lightly over the fabric. Sienna. When the debt was erased, the marriage agreement technically stopped serving its purpose. She looked up at him. "That happened on our wedding night." "I know, and you're only bringing it up now. I had other problems." She waited. Adrian's expression became unusually uncertain. "If you want out, there will be no argument. The bakery remains yours. Your mother's house remains protected. Your brother's tuition is already in trust. Nothing changes if you leave." Sienna stared at him for several seconds. Then she said, "You're terrible at this. At what, asking your wife to stay?" His jaw tightened. "I wasn't going to make staying sound like an obligation." "Good." Silence. Adrian looked almost irritated. That was not an answer. Sienna smiled. For once, she let him wait. Then she reached up, caught the front of his shirt, and kissed him. When she pulled back, Adrian's hand remained at her waist. Was that an answer? "I prefer clear terms." She laughed. Fine. I am staying. Because of the baby." "No." His expression changed. Sienna looked around the kitchen where, months earlier, she had felt like a visitor inside a beautiful prison. "I'm staying because I choose you. The baby is choosing nothing yet. Try not to assign it responsibilities before it can hold its own head up." Adrian smiled. "I can agree to that. And no succession meetings before breakfast. Done. No armed men frightening bakery customers. Already negotiated. No pretending you're reading the same page for 12 hours when you're waiting for me to come home. That happened once. It happened 4 times. He frowned. "You counted I own a bakery. Numbers matter." Adrian kissed her before she could continue negotiating. Outside the kitchen windows, morning spread slowly across the Valenti estate. There were still guards at the gates. Still, enemies Adrian would have to manage. Still consequences from Rocco's choices that could not be erased by one council vote. Samuel Crest's confession could not return 9 years. A pregnancy could not magically turn a forced marriage into a love story. The beginning remained what it had been, a bargain made under pressure. A locked room disguised as a choice. But the ending did not have to resemble the beginning. Months earlier, Sienna Bellini had entered the Valenti family because a debt told her where she belonged. Adrian had accepted the marriage because duty told him what he could control. Rocco had built his power around bloodlines, certainty, and the belief that people were easiest to manage when their futures were decided for them. He had been wrong. Blood could create an heir. It could not create a family. A family began when people stopped deciding who belonged to whom and started choosing one another.